Hello and welcome to Sharing the Good News, a daily Bible teaching by Mike Williams. I'm Tony Blackman, inviting you to sit back for the next 30 minutes and listen to Mike as he shares with you teachings that could possibly change your life. And now, here is Mike Williams.
Thank you, Tony. And this is Mike Williams here again to share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ with you. We hope you're enjoying the programs. We welcome your comments and hope that whatever they are, that you'll stay in contact with us. Some folks are writing in, letting us know what's happening and what's going on and what they think about the teaching. And as we said, any of your comments, good or bad, they are all welcome. We're wanting to go into the book of Acts and a chapter here that I believe settles an issue that nobody has a right to even argue about anymore. The subject material we're going to cover in the next couple of days is going to bring to a conclusion a matter that is absolutely being argued about almost without exception in every denomination and non-denomination around the world. Now, I am admittedly, occasionally, might be given to exaggeration, but in this, I exaggerate not at all. This is a controversy. But we want to go back to the book of Acts, and I want to show you a controversy that erupted. After the controversy erupted, you'll see what it was all about. We don't have to draw any conclusions. It is just there. You'll see what the result of that eruption was. You'll see the debate take place. It will unfold right in front of your eyes as you follow along through in this chapter here in the book of Acts. And you will see the opinions of so many very profoundly famous people and respected people. Some not so respected, at least in our eyes anyway, such as the Pharisees. You're going to see what their opinion was, and you're going to watch it change right in front of your eyes as you follow along, and we look at this incredible chapter here in the book of Acts. A lot of times people believe that the issue of grace and law somehow was that this controversy was started by Mike Williams. Believe me, I didn't start this controversy. This controversy started long ago, even as early as we can tell, and probably before even this, but when Cain killed Abel. Why did Cain kill Abel? The Bible tells us very clearly they both offered a sacrifice to God, but one offered the works of his hands, and one offered a blood sacrifice. Not any work or labor of his own, but he offered the life of another. That was acceptable to God. But Cain's works, he labored so hard. He grew those crops so good. He did a good job. And he piled up so much stuff and so many things representing the works of his hands, and God rejected it. Now, if you don't think God's view and opinion of you will change how you deal with people, folks, this is the very root of human nature and the very root of the way people view each other and why certain conduct was. People say, you're saying that you preach grace, that's just an excuse for murder. Let me tell you, it is not the grace of God and God accepting someone through the sacrifice of another that causes people to murder. It's those who feel rejected by God that are murderers. No one who ever felt completely accepted by God would ever murder, would ever hurt or take the life of anyone else. But you see, in the life of Cain, Cain's sacrifice, his works were rejected, so he felt rejected before God. And in that feeling of rejection, what did he do? He killed his own brother. We watch this happening all the time. Not in the physical sense, maybe. Now, out in the social structure, folks, you're seeing the consequences of the law in people's minds. You are seeing the consequences of religion rooted and grounded so deeply in people that rage is now coming out. While the religious channels around this country are spewing out the very thing that is eating the heart and mind out of people and turning them into murderers and turning them into obsessive compulsive behaviors while claiming to be those who are there to rectify these problems. My, that sounds like someone who has been captured and becomes addicted to their one who has captured them. It's a syndrome that is existed throughout humanity, and it comes through so many times. But that is what's coming through. We stay addicted to religion. We still stay addicted to those who say they've got all the answers for our problems, and what we do not realize is that the problems that we have are coming out of the heart based on the doctrines they are teaching us. Rooted in the law, rooted in legalism, not in the grace of God. Now this controversy is a great one. I didn't start it though, I promise you. I may have joined in the fray, but I didn't start this. This is as old as the history of man itself, and right straight on through, as he even gives us comparison about Abraham having 2 sons, and one born of the Spirit was also persecuted by the one who was born after his works. The works of man always are angered at those who are accepted without works, that it's just a promise. Can't be this way. Just can't be. I refuse to believe it. Well, refuse or accept. That's your choice. But all we're offering to you is that God has accepted the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on your behalf, and you don't have to feel rejected by God to the point that obsessive-compulsive behavior, to the point of even murdering and assassinating people in character and mind and heart, just does not have to take place. Acts 15. We better get started here. We're going to run out of time. Acts 15, verse 1. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, except you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. Folks, this doctrine continues today. Oh, not of circumcision, the except doctrine. Except you tithe, you cannot be saved. Except you submit to church authority, you cannot be saved. Except you believe exactly like I believe, you cannot be saved. We've heard this doctrine in many ways, but here in this particular case, we'll stick with the subject and follow it through and see what the results are. So we do know that certain men, they are never named explicitly by name in this chapter, but they are certain men. And they were there teaching the brethren. These people were already believers, and they came around teaching them then that they had to be circumcised, and then, as you'll see in verse 5, also keep the law of Moses to be saved. You can't be saved unless you do something. You can't be saved unless you do something. And then we have the ministry of Paul coming in verse 2, where he said, when therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and disputation with them. Now, again, let's stop here for just a moment. This ministry of the gospel of the grace of God is erupting in dissension and disputation. And it is erupting in churches all over the world. They are being confronted with the gospel of the grace of God. And then when the dissension and disputation starts, we're not advocating dissension and disputation. That is not what our goal is. But we are also not advocating that a person back down from the gospel. What you get accused of then is, well, you know, everything that causes strife is of the devil, and we can tell that your doctrine is not of God because it is causing dissension. and dispute. Oh, look around. Everything's in chaos. You know why everything's in chaos? Because the light is shining in darkness, and it's like a bunch of rats scurrying when the light's turned on in the middle of the night. That's why there's so much trouble. So what do you think? We ought to just leave the light off and let the rats eat up everything? No, we're not going to do it. We're going to turn the light on. And the light of God's glorious gospel, yes, it may stir up dissension. It may create a dispute. But don't ever let a religious person tell you that the gospel of God's grace could not be true because it makes them angry. Folks, if a person getting angry about what they hear verifies that it's not the truth, then Jesus didn't preach the truth, Paul didn't preach the truth, because everything they said everybody got angry about, except those that believed, and those that accepted the gospel of the grace of God. But it says there was no small dissension or disputation with them. Now, if you want to know the mindset of the day, I would think that Paul would be top dog here. How about you? That he'd be the one saying, now wait a minute, you guys are saying that you have to be circumcised to be saved. That's just not right. And, you know, to resolve this, you need to go be corrected up at the Church of Jerusalem. The church, you know. And it says, though, that after there was no small dissension and disputation with them, they determined, who? These certain men, in verse 1, they determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other of them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and elders about this question. I want you to look at that. What were they going to Jerusalem? What were they going to the apostles and elders at Jerusalem about? About this question. And what was the pervading mindset? Whose doctrine was so accepted and so much widely received that they felt they had the authority to send the other one to Jerusalem about this doctrine? Was it Paul who sent them to Jerusalem about this doctrine? No, it was they who sent Paul and Barnabas to Jerusalem about this doctrine. I think showing us that the pervading mindset was that the gospel of Jesus Christ was indeed salvation by faith, but if you don't do this and you don't do that, you can't be saved. So we see then in verse 3, and being brought on their way by the church, so they all went up with them, taking Barnabas and Paul, because they were going to be questioned about this doctrine. You're going to have to go to the elders at Jerusalem, the apostles, about this question. If I could sit and relate to you the number of times I've talked with people who have been sent before the elders about this question, it is remarkable. But I want to tell you about an elders meeting that already took place. An elders meeting where the very apostles of Jesus Christ were there, whose authority we need to look at here, and their position we need to look at here, and their decision. There is not a board of elders who has the right to get together and decide this question. This question has been decided almost 2,000 years ago. It's been resolved. Do you have to keep the law to be saved? Any group of elders who have met and said otherwise and have said that you have to do this or you have to do that to be saved, you have to be baptized in the name of Jesus only to be saved, you have to be baptized to be saved, and unless you do this, unless you're baptized in the Holy Spirit, you can't be saved. Unless you do this, you can't be saved. Unless you do that, you can't be saved. They are superseding a decision that took place that you are going to be astounded, I'm telling you, as we go through this, that this question has been resolved. It has been settled. This is a settled issue. No one has a right. I pastored for 3 years, and we got together to consider such things ourselves several times. Bunk! We didn't have the right to even have the meeting. The meeting's already been held. In fact, this one is even strange that it even had to take place at all. He says that they were brought along their way by the church. They passed through Phoenicia and Samaria, declaring the conversion of the Gentiles, and they caused great joy unto all the brethren. And when they were come to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and elders, and they declared all things that God had done with them. My, you can almost hear some guys getting ready to go in before the elders. They're trying everything they can. They're saying, hey, look what God did. Look what God did. Look at the miracles. It is an assumption of my own, but I think it's almost a delivery by Paul and Barnabas to say, look, this proves that what we're saying is right. Oh, it's something we all try to do, is try to point to the good things happening and try to prove that what we're saying is right because of the good things that are happening. That doesn't validate what we're saying, not for Paul, me, you, or anybody else. What validates truth is truth. It is not whether or not you see something happening. And right now in America, folks, we are obsessed with validating truth based on manifestations of things. From one end of our country to the other, and even into Canada and other countries of the world. It is the way religion determines truth. You see something happen, hype begins, and they decide truth. Truth cannot be determined by experience. Don't ever let experience or observation be what determines truth. Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth and the life. If it is not a revelation of Jesus Christ and His glory, it is not truth, no matter what the manifestation is, no matter what seeming good things come out of it. It always seems good, folks, but boy, the end thereof is an incredibly destructive thing. And it has happened in the religious community so many times that it is so documented, it is amazing that religion hasn't even been outlawed in America by now. Would have been if it was anything else. But the gospel of Jesus Christ is so powerful. But right now, folks, we live in a time of legalism. We're not living in a time of the gospel going around the world. We are living in a time of legalism being spread through the Christian community like wildfire, saying, you cannot be saved except, and everything along with and without Jesus is being added to the gospel of Jesus Christ. The Bible says in verse 5, but there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed. So these were Pharisees which believed. Now, the thing we've got to accept also is the group that Paul is going before are called the elders and the apostles of the church. Now, in the eldership and the apostles of the church, there was a sect within the leadership of the church called the Pharisees, which that's fine. You don't have to not be something to be a part of the church. But I want you to see that within the leadership of the church at Jerusalem, there was a sect of Pharisees. That's fine, but the rest of it isn't fine. They rose up saying that it was needful to circumcise them, the Gentiles, and to command them to keep the laws of Moses. I think we have here already the full reality of what the question is. We have the reality of where the dispute began. The dispute began when two men were preaching in a city that you had to keep the law and be circumcised to be saved. Paul and Barnabas, it says there was no small disputation among them. Then they said, you got to go to Jerusalem before the elders and the apostles about this question. They got there, they were received of the apostles and the elders, and in that group of apostles and elders, verse 5 says that there was a sect of Pharisees who were believing. But they said that it is needful to circumcise them and to keep the law of Moses. Now, do you see the picture? Has your local church met together to see whether or not you have to keep the law? Are they grappling with the issue of grace and law? Don't grapple. Don't argue. There's no need for dissension. Dissension is created not when the gospel is preached. Dissension is created when the gospel is opposed. Verse 6. And the apostles and elders came together for to consider this matter. This is the matter. This is the one that is to be discussed here in this one particular conference of Jerusalem. There's a later conference. Now this one is only about the Gentile. Let me repeat. This conference is only about the Gentile. Later on in the book of Acts, they had another meeting about the Jew, but we're not going to get into that. This is about the Gentile. But you'll see that it's irrelevant what anybody else says about the Jew, because you're going to see that whatever is true for the Gentile here, at least according to this conference delegates who had gathered here to decide about this matter, you're going to see that they had a matter to settle about this issue, and they came together for to consider this matter and this matter alone. Now, I think it's just a little bit bizarre myself to stop and think. Now, here we have the apostles and elders that were in Jerusalem, and they had been in Jerusalem for quite some time, and then Paul came on the scene. But Paul, as he said, he was like one born out of due season, and he was one born at a really bizarre time. He says a very strange thing happened to him, and making reference to his conversion on the road to Damascus. We know in Paul's testimony he said, when I left to go with these letters for the destruction of other Christians, he said, I had these letters in my hand, and Jesus appeared to me. And then after Christ appeared to him and he was converted, Paul gives testimony to the fact that he says that Jesus stayed with him in the desert for 3 years and taught him the gospel. And in the book of Galatians, the first part of it tells us that Paul never did go up to Jerusalem until 14 years later, after his conversion. And after his conversion, he only spent, the Bible says, 10 days with the Apostle Peter. And James, he saw him. There is no record of any dialogue between them. They saw him. They saw one another. But other than that, he said that he spent no time with any of the rest of the apostles. We have a good portion of over 20 years passing, and Paul having spent no time at all with the other apostles except Peter, whom he stayed with for 10 days, according to the book of Galatians, as Paul lays this out. The book of Galatians goes through and records this very conference. He goes through and describes this conference, this incredible conference that took place here, and also the conference that took place a little bit later about the Jew. But you see, this is the thing that is causing such controversy right now. You say, well, you admit it's causing controversy. I admit it. I admit it's causing controversy. The thing that I do not want you to do, and I do not want anyone to do, is to take the religious answer that just because it is a controversy means it's of the devil. That is a cop-out. That is the weakest, flimsiest excuse for trying to defend your doctrine that could possibly ever be. Oh, it causes confusion. Don't you remember when you started believing something, those that have accused everybody that what they're preaching is wrong because it's causing confusion? Don't you remember that's the reason you were asked to leave the place where you used to be? And they validated that the reason that you were wrong is because that it was creating confusion, strife, that it was causing dissension. It was causing people to argue and dispute about things. The very people who are standing up this very day and saying this message of the gospel of God's grace can't be right. Look at all of the dispute, the debate, the dissension that's going on. And those very people, I will guarantee you, were left out of another church situation being accused of exactly the same thing. Paul's life and his interjection into this, we have seen so far 3 opinions. We know Paul's opinion. Paul believed that it was by grace and by grace alone without works. We know the opinion of the 2 men, or the certain men who are never named specifically out of verse 1. They believed that you had to be circumcised to be saved. We also have seen the opinion of one part of, as far as we can tell, a part of the group of elders that was there who were believing Pharisees who said, you have to keep the law. You must keep the law of Moses. And then, verse 6 again, and the apostles and elders came together for to consider this matter. And that is what is being discussed. Paul, as he began to go through all of the churches, he made it very, very clear where he stood. And yes, folks, I tell you, it is a bizarre thing. It's bizarre to think that the apostles may not have had it all together. But it is certainly not untrue. We know that up until the time of almost 15 years or thereabouts, that the apostles still did not believe or understand that the gospel was for the Gentile also. Because Peter, as you will see in our next broadcast, he makes reference to the fact that his experience where God revealed to him that the Gentile could be saved also. And in that revelation, God told him, do not call unclean that which I have cleansed. You have the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ in your heart and in your life. Yes, it causes a dispute, but no one has a right to change the decision of this council, and we're going to find out what it is. Stay tuned.
You've been listening to Sharing the Good News with Mike Williams. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in again as Mike shares more life-changing revelations that could possibly change your life. And remember, God's not angry with you. He loves you.